sometimes we have a hyper focus on a metric or a number. And, people very proudly shout about their CX metric, but more often, unfortunately than not, the number is not really grounded anyway. So, we're seeing a lot of businesses talk about, having a really high X score, but they haven't correlated that experience metric or experience score with any of their operational data. So they're not measuring experiences by segments, or they're not measuring experiences by customer types, or even personas. So that's what really sort of got me interested in your topic, the focus on, okay, so you have a score, now what? You have a score, what does it mean? You have a score, what next? And I think that when you are looking at, your customer experience score, for me in the CX space, I'm always trying to understand why. And sometimes, a bad score can give you a lot more whys than a potentially good score, because people get sort of blinded, right? And they think, oh, well, our NPS is good, so we're okay. And they lose focus on what it's really all about, which is the actual experience they're delivering to customers and what their customers are telling them. So we see a lot of businesses just focus on the number and lose sight of the insights. So for example, you might have a high net promoter or a high CSAT, but you're getting feedback, you're getting all these little nuggets of insights of customers telling you what they want, which if you are digging deeper, as you mentioned, if you're diving a little bit deeper and pulling out those insights, you can actually utilize those to start building new experiences, designing new experiences, predicting, potential future customer behavior, and empowering your internal teams, your development teams, and your product teams of what your customers might want next. So if you're too focused on that score, you're missing out on that, right? Because you're just looking at the number and you're not looking at, the root cause and the insights.
So focusing on the outcomes is basically don't give you any hints on what to do, right? You could the basic CX program is basically measuring the status quo with an NPS question and ask an open question. You could say, hey, we can find out why. We just read in the open comments what they say. And then we have it. So what's missing there?
I think what's probably missing there, Frank, is, a lot of programs tend to be a little bit too, people just survey to survey, if we're being honest. I think a lot of people are just ticking that box to say they have a customer feedback program or a voice of the customer program, and they're really missing the objective behind the program, right? And they're not sort of thinking holistically about asking the right questions at the right time to the right people. And that all goes back to your first point around a hyper focused on metrics, right, on numbers. Because I think when you look at a good, robust customer experience program, one that's sustainable, the data and the analytics, or the numbers and the metrics, are one layer of a good holistic program, right? So yeah, it's definitely, and I'm the biggest advocate for having good experience metrics, but it's definitely one layer in a more holistic program. So how do you tie your experience metrics with other metrics or KPIs in the business? And how do you align those to your overall customer journey and say, okay, well, in this stage of a journey, this is what we think is happening. This is what our teammates are telling us, or our employees are telling us is happening. These are the processes that our customers are sort of dealing with from a backstage perspective. And these are the metrics that sort of prove to us how we deliver and how we're performing, both experience and operationally. So it's so many more layers, right? So,
yeah.
And you hit the nail on the head when you said, okay, people, okay, cool. We have NPS, tick. We have the Y, tick. So they feel like that's everything. And it's a great start. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to dissuade or, make anybody feel like it's not a good thing to be doing. It's definitely a great start. But once you start getting that data coming in, you have to start thinking about closing those loops, right? Closing all of the loops with that data, ensuring that you are getting back to your customers, to ensure that if they had a bad experience, you are, sort of correcting that. From a more of an operational perspective, understanding root causes. So why are so many people on a Friday complaining about wait times? How do we address that? Is that a workforce management issue? And then, of course, strategically, how do you take it back to your leadership team or your board of directors and ensure that the business is investing in the right tools and systems, the business is communicating the right messages and customer-centric cultural initiatives to the business? So it is so much bigger than that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What I see is really, when you look at just the numbers, there are so many things which can go wrong in an organization, because what often happens is blame game. Yeah. If it goes lower, we are thinking, whose guilt is it? Or basically the question, with the different countries or business segments have different scores, but is it good or is it not? Then you look at benchmarks, but there's so much risk in benchmark, and there's so much energy consumed in that for actually nothing, because the only thing you can do is to try to get better, or to basically try to get better. And that's the only question you need to ask yourself. What is the information I get to get better? Right?
And you touched on something there, Frank, that I think is really important as a CX practitioner. So working in the CX space in an organization, it's really important that you understand that the metric or the score is quite often the impact on another department. So I'll give you an example. In working in Digicel, the customer experience metrics, or the Net Promoter Score, the customer satisfaction score, the customer care service levels, for example, are all significantly impacted by the performance of the network. So if the network, for example, were to go down or be impacted, or we have an outage, there is nothing the customer experience or customer care teams can do to correct that, right? Your experience metrics are absolutely going to take a hit, especially if you're measuring transactionally. You're going to see a hit immediately, of course, depending on how your program is set up, but you will absolutely experience a decline in your CX metrics if something from an operational perspective were to go wrong like that. And, as a customer experience practitioner, something that's really useful to be able to do is correlate your experience metrics with operational happenings or operational incidents in the business. And more often than not, CX metrics are a bit of a lagging indicator, right? Particularly Net Promoter Score. So the Net Promoter Score will dip or throw depending on actions taken by the operations. Yeah. So that was something that was very useful to me as a practitioner, was to correlate my experience metrics with operational incidents or going ons. And that goes both, good and bad. If the business was to launch a really exciting marketing initiative or marketing program or free giveaway, you see an increase in the Net Promoter. So it's very important to balance and to understand the impact of the operations on the experience metrics. And of course, from a leadership perspective, it's important that we don't use, you just mentioned it, right? The guilt. You don't use the stick approach, but rather the carrot approach when you're thinking about metrics and getting people sort of working towards, or, performance managed on these metrics, because it's important to realize the impact that other areas in the business directly have on these experience metrics.
So true. So the topic today is, stop focusing on measuring outcomes. Instead, deep dive on root causes and personalized actions. So let's dissect this a bit. What are you suggesting to do?
Yeah, I think, for me, what's the most useful is always sort of understanding the why. And as simple as it sounds, right? That 5 why approach. So if you, for example, have negative scores in one area of the business, dig into that, right? Really spend some time understanding why and focusing on the root cause. Again, if you have 1 or 2 customers telling you that something is a problem, they're probably right? No matter how large your business is. And quite often you'll find that there's a misalignment between what your business thinks it's delivering, or, the experience your business thinks it's giving, compared to what your customer is actually experiencing. So take a real methodological approach in understanding, digging through that feedback. And, as I mentioned before, aligning that feedback on your customer journey. So something we like to do in EXCO is we will take a customer journey and overlay a complaint onto it. So if we get a complaint through a voice of the customer program that's correlated with a negative score, we will walk that customer's journey on the map to understand where the breaks in the process or where the breaks in the experience occurred that sort of resulted in this negative metric or this negative score, so that then you can take a hyper focus into the stages of the journey that you're finding those breaks in. And of course, work with your business process improvement teams or your business process improvement understandings and project management teams to understand how you can improve or tweak or remove or kill the processes that are causing pain to the customer. And then you watch the score again to see, how it moves based on your actions. And again, that can go for both good and bad scores, right? So if you launch a new product, for example, we have a launch and love methodology where, we include customer experience initiatives and customer experience ownership and accountability in every single step of a product or service launch. And to tie in your question about, root cause and metrics, for us, we always use the data or the metrics to understand if we're delivering what we wanted to, what we designed to, and what iterations need to be made. In CX, it's a very iterative process, right? Because, we can all agree customer behavior is changing every day. And it's really important that we continuously stay on top of what our customers what feedback they're giving us, what experiences they're liking, what experiences they're coming back for, what we're doing well. And of course, what's causing a little bit of pain or friction, and where do we need to tweak?
What's your point on personalized actions? Do you mean that actions need to be personalized on a per customer basis?
Well, that's a dream, right? And I think if you use the data that you're getting from your customers' feedback in the right way, you can look at building out true detailed segments or ideally personas that you can understand. Okay, so this type of persona, if we can start to group people understanding, again, a combination of operational insights as well as experience insights. If we can take data to back up our personas, we can then start to look at a method or an approach where we can deliver more personalized experiences. So I'll give you another example to make it a little bit more tangible. If I shop at a supermarket and I give them data, so I give them feedback on my recent shopping experience, or I have a loyalty card, so they know, well, Samantha buys Pampers every month when she comes to the supermarket. The last 2 times she came, there's no Pampers in her bill, and she gave a negative review. You can start digging into data to understand what perhaps caused my negative experience, and think about designing a proactive and personalized approach where engage your marketing teams and send out an email or do a telephone campaign or an SMS campaign to say, hey, Samantha, we noticed you buy Pampers every month, letting you know we got back in stock. So I think there's so many innovative and proactive things we can do with customer experience data that we're missing out on, right? There's so many opportunities when you look at the amount of data that we have on our customers to really deliver to that personalized experience. I can tell you, I don't have that experience with my supermarket now. I wish I did, because I know they know all these things about me because I do have a loyalty card. So they know my name and they know what I buy. And I have also given them feedback, but there's a big gap in terms of what they're doing with that feedback. And that's what I mean by personalized, right?